Namaskar. Welcome to this online course Current Regulatory Requirements for Conducting Clinical Trials in India for Investigational New Drug and New Drug version 2. Today I will take you through the lecture number 12. The lecture 12 has been divided into two parts. The lecture 12A, which is the requirements for import of manufacture of new drug, investigational new drug for conducting clinical trials in India, and next to this is lecture 12B, which is the requirements for import manufacture of new drug, investigational new drug in India. So, when we say new drug and when we say investigational new drug, by this time you must have gone through all the lectures, various lectures where there is a definition of the new drug and where there is definition of clinical trial, as well as there is a definition of investigational new drug. But for the purpose of recapitulation, I would like to mention that when we say investigational new drug, it means a drug which is never has been manufactured in the globe. So, we have defined this investigational new drug in the current new drugs and clinical trials rules 2019, which says that it is a new chemical entity or a biological entity or a substance which has never been approved as drug in any country. So, that is very important. That means it has never been used as a drug in any country, and when we say it is a new drug, it is possible that it has been used as a new drug in other country, but it is a new drug in India because it has been not tried or tested in the Indian population. So, we have to clearly understand what is a new drug and what is a investigational new drug. Also, when we say new chemical entity, we can also, just for your information, it can be a substance which is already existing, but its therapeutic efficacy has never been claimed. So, it can be a substance which has never been published or which has never been used as a drug in the country. So, that is the difference when we say a chemical entity, a new chemical entity. So, investigational new drug is a new chemical entity or a biological entity, and when we say it is a chemical entity, it means that a substance or a chemical which has never been used as a drug in the country or anywhere in the, but when we use the word investigational, it means it has never been used anywhere in the world. So, now we start through this lecture. Let us see what we learned in this lecture. The learning objectives. What are the current regulatory rules as per the new drug and clinical trial rules 2019? You know that when this new drug and clinical trial rules was published, it was published in March 2019 and has been implemented from that time. In this rule, in this new drug and clinical trial rules, in this particular lecture, we are going to cover the manufacture import of new drug or investigational new drug for conducting clinical trial in the country. And the same conditions are existing for the bioavailability and bioequivalence studies or for the purpose of test and analysis. So, you will see in the coming slides, always we write clinical trial or bioavailability or a bioequivalence study or test and analysis. So, I would not be repeating the word bioavailability, bioequivalence or test and analysis, and I would restrict my lecture or my presentation on the clinical trial, but it is the same requirements for the new drugs in this new drug and clinical trial rules. And also we will cover the manufacture of unapproved API, active pharmaceutical ingredient, for the development of new drug, investigational new drug for clinical trial. So, what is this unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient? It is saying that it has never been approved, or that means has been permitted or licensed. We use the word licensing in the India. So, we say it has never been approved for as a drug in the country by the regulatory authority. So, you must be knowing who is the regulatory authority, the Central Licensing Authority, who is responsible for permitting clinical trial of new drugs in the country, for permitting any manufacture or import of new drugs in the country besides many other functions, and Central Licensing Authority is Central Drug Standard Control Organization. And in this lecture we have the various conditions of permissions which are granted by CDSCO, that is the Central Licensing Authority, for conduct of clinical trial with a new drug or with an investigational new drug. So, the first part, as I said, 12A, it is chapter 8 in the new drug and clinical trial rules, which says the manufacture of new drugs and investigational new drug for the conduct of clinical trial. As per the chapter 8, you will see there are rules from rules 52 to rules 66. The rules cover all the requirements of manufacture of new drugs and investigational new drug in the country for the purpose of conducting clinical trial. So, starting with rule 52, what it says? It says the application process. So, what is that application process? As it is says that you cannot manufacture any new drug or investigational new drug in the country for a clinical trial unless you are permitted by CDSCO, the Central Licensing Authority. So, no person can manufacture any new drug in the country without the permission of the regulatory authority, that is Central Licensing Authority. Also, what is the form for that? There is a form which is called CT10, and as per this form, any person who intends to manufacture this new drug or investigational new drug, they have to apply in this specific form which is called CT10 to the Central Licensing Authority. In this form, there are also the various requirements, the documents which is to be submitted and the fees to be paid for this, for the application for the new drug or the investigational new drug for the conduct of clinical trial. So, what is there in this? If you see the 4th schedule, which is also a schedule in the new drugs and the clinical trial rules, it gives the detailed requirements, the documentations requirements for submission along with this form CT10, and the fees are all specified in the 6th schedule. For your information, that always the fees for such application is 5,000 per product. And then the grant of permission to manufacture these new drugs or investigational new drugs is given in under rule 53. And what is the process? We go to the next. It says that after the submission of all the documentation requirement and application in CT10 along with the fees, the licensing authority CLA, the reviewers in the CLA scrutinize the information and the documentation furnished with the application, and if required they may issue a query, further query to this, or they may approve the applications if satisfied with the submission requirements. In all cases, it has to be very clearly remembered that if you see the CT10 form, the various requirements are very clearly mentioned, and a complete application form is very important for getting the that is the most important part, that you submit all information in a complete documentation and with a complete form online processing for further processing of such applications. And you know that the CDSCO is online, has an online system for receiving such application. In this application form, the various documentations, for examples, if you see any of the form, you will see that the name of the drug or the code name for a drug, if it is an investigational new drug. These are some examples which I am trying to share with you. So, there can be composition, dosage form, indication, therapeutic category. So, these are the things which are the common content of such forms. Also the manufacturer, manufacturing address, and also you have the annexures where you have to submit additional information related to this particular applications and your drug, and the documentation requirements which is in the 4th schedule, which has a detailed information about the drug as well. So, you have a chemistry manufacturing control information which is as per the 4th schedule, and the 4th schedule will refer to the 2nd schedule which has a very detailed requirements. So, you have to go through this schedule to understand what are the regulatory requirements, but these are all related to the manufacturing of the drugs, the chemical testing and analysis of the drug, whatever information which you have about the drugs at present. So, once you submit, once it is reviewed, and if it is satisfied, the regulatory authority is satisfied with your applications, then they may give you a permission under form CT11, and there is a timeline for all review and issuance of permission, which is 90 working days. But in case they are not satisfied with the applications and it is understood that the documentation and the supportive requirements cannot fulfill at present, then with the reasons recorded in writing, the CDSCO may reject the application which is made under Rule 52. In case if CLA finds that there are some deficiencies in the application and the same may be rectified, in that case they can issue a query to the applicant with the deficiencies with a specified timeline. So, once the query is received by the applicant, then the deficiencies may be rectified and they can submit the deficiencies to the CLA, Central Licensing Authority, within the period specified, and when such deficiencies are rectified within the period, then in that case again the CLA shall scrutinize such application and if satisfied can grant permission to manufacture for conduct of clinical trial. However, they can also reject the application. So, it depends on whether your submission, further submission is complete or it is incomplete, or whether the data is not enough to satisfy the permission. Now, in that case, however, there is always in the, as you see that in the regulatory requirements, when you have a application format, a grant of permission format, a conditions of permissions, as well as you have a mechanism of appeal. So, in case of rejection, the applicant can further come back to CLA with a specific fees, but it is also, it is a fees which is specified in the 6th schedule, it is 2000, and with the fee they can come back to reconsider the application within a period of 60 working days if they want to still go with their application, and after that which can be again verified. However, when the application is further rejected by CLA and the applicant is not satisfied, they can also appeal before the central government within 45 working days, 45 days from the date of receipt of such decision, and the central government, after giving a opportunity of hearing to the applicant, may dispose of the applications again within a period of 60 days. So, there is a complete mechanism of appeal for your application. Next is the Rule 54, which talks about the validity of the license, which is 3 years from the date of its issue, unless it is suspended or cancelled by the Central Licensing Authority before. In some substances, and which can be an exceptional circumstances, there can be lot of cases where the applicant comes back that they are not able to start the clinical trial, manufacture the drug due to various reasons, and if the CLA is satisfied with the reasons given by the applicant, or in case of some exigency as well, the CLA may extend the period of permission for a further period of 1 year. So, that is the validity of the license. Now, what is there in the condition of permission? That is the Rule 55, which says the condition of permission. In this permission, the grant of permission is subject to the various conditions. What is there? The first thing is most important is that when they manufacture that new drug, they shall ensure when an applicant has get a permission to manufacture a new drug, they will make use of the new drug only for the purpose of clinical trial, and no part of it can be sold in the market or supplied to any other person or agency or an institution or organization whatever work, if you start with it, whatever you have mentioned in your application format and whatever permission has been given to you by CLA has to be complied with strictly by the applicant. So, that is the regulatory requirements. In this permission, it is said that once you manufacture the drugs, the permission will define you the quantity to be manufactured. So, it can be manufactured only in small quantities, and when you manufacture, it has to be manufactured in a good manufacturing practices condition, in a, we call it a GMP environment, observing the principles of GMP. First is that you manufacture a specific quantity, and second is that you manufacture it in a good manufacturing practices environment, observing all principles of GMP. The permission holder shall keep a record. So, it is most important that as much you manufacture, you have to maintain the record, and the recording format is also specified in these 4 forms, but how you have to keep a record. So, the records of the new drugs and to whom it has been supplied for the clinical trial, also that when such drug has expired or the shelf life has expired, you have to specify a shelf life for the drug as per the study which you have done for that drug. So, if you see the CMC data, which we call the chemistry manufacturing control data, which is given in details in the second schedule, you will understand what are the different data requirements which are to be gradually fulfilled for such drug. So, once you take a permission for test and analysis, you manufacture the drug, you prepare the various documentation, the manufacturing, the testing, the stability study, the validation part as much as possible at that particular quantity. So, these are the data which you gradually start preparing for your drug, and then you come back to the regulatory agency for the application, is not it? And then once you apply, you get a permission for the clinical trial, you start maintaining the records for everything. Now, if the drugs is not used, then you have to keep a, or if you find that now the drug failed. So, you have a test results, and when you test it from time to time and the drug has failed, in that case this has to be destroyed, and whatever action you take, you have to have an accountability for the same. Next rule, which is rule 56, is the license to manufacture new drugs. In this license, what we say that after obtaining the permission under the rule 53, the person who intends to manufacture this new drug. So, you got a permission in CT11 form from CLA. Now, what you do? Now, you have to manufacture the new drugs in a particular manufacturing premises. So, you go under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, there is an application which is an application form called form 30, where you apply to the concerned state licensing authority for manufacturing this new drug. So, you go to this state licensing authority with the permission of CT11 and you get a permission in form 29 for manufacturing a new drug for the purpose of clinical trial, for the purpose of test or analysis, for the purpose of bioavailability or bioequivalence study. So, this is the application process after you get permission from CLA. We go to rule 57, where it is said that whenever you get such permissions, you are bound for inspection by the licensing authority. So, whenever a license is issued for a new drug for the conduct of clinical trial, it is open for inspection by the CLA or by the state licensing authority who gives you now permission in form 29. You know, in case of the biological products, in case of some of the products where CDSCO or CLA is also a licensing approving authority along with the state licensing authority, there is a process of permission by the CLA along with state licensing authority, which is the form 29. For example, biologicals, which includes the vaccines, various rDNA products, the monoclonal antibodies, which includes large volume parenterals. So, these are some of the products which are jointly licensed by SLA and CLA, that is state licensing authority and the central licensing authority. Now, so you have the permission, you manufacture the drug and then it is the inspection which can be done at, it is not a compulsory process, it is a mandatory process, but it can be done at any point of time and without any. So, it says that without prior notice or it may be with a notice to inspect such premises, and then investigation is conducted and they investigate how you manufacture, how you store, how you record, how you use the drug in the clinical trial. We come to rule 58, which is a regulatory process. In case you fail to comply with the conditions, the applicant fails to comply with the conditions of the licenses, then the CLA can take action. But before taking action, there is a process where a show cause notice is issued, and after affording, then there is an opportunity which is being given to the applicant for giving a response to the show cause notice, and then they can suspend such permission or cancel the permission which is granted for in form CT11. So, this is a regulatory process. So, it cannot be, so you know, whatever conditions particularly which is important, how you manufacture, how you record the your drug, how you record the content of the drug, whom you have given, whom you have used, how it has been used, how you have stored, that is very important for conducting the clinical trial in compliance with the GMP requirements, in compliance with the requirements of the new drug and clinical trial rules. Now, again there is a process of appeal. So, if there is a license or a permission which has been suspended or cancelled, as in the previous page you have seen, in that case they can also again appeal to the central government within a period of 60 days of the receipt of the order, and after the central government being heard, they can, after giving an opportunity of being heard, they can pass an order which may be considered appropriate in facts and circumstances of the case. So, it will be examined by the central government at that level, and you can be given again a further, they can continue with the order of CDSU or they can ask the CLA to reconsider your application. So, this is the regulatory process. We come to rule 59, which is an application for permission to manufacture unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient for the development of the pharmaceutical formulation for clinical trial, for test analysis or BA/BE study. Now, why do we need this particular rule for application for permission to manufacture the unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient? This is because if you see a manufacturer normally of a formulation manufacturer we have, who has the manufacturing permission to manufacture a dosage form, and we also have the manufacturer who are manufacturer of active pharmaceutical ingredient. So, it is not possible always that the same manufacturer may also, it is possible sometimes that the same manufacturer may have both the facilities at the same place, like an API manufacturing facility as well as formulation manufacturing facility, but in most cases they would be at a different site. So, that is the reason we had to create two forms, the form CT12 for the permission to manufacture pharmaceutical formulation and CT13 for the manufacture of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So, whosoever is the manufacturer and who is proposing to manufacture an unapproved active pharmaceutical ingredient has to apply in the CT form 13. And if you go through these forms, as I told in the previous slides, all cases the content is same. So, everything is that you talk about the drug or a code number, your site, your address, your constitution, because you have to be those are the legal documents, and then you have the documents which are mentioned under annexure and what are the other documents which you need to submit. So, these are all that same. The fourth schedule, which includes the documentation requirements wherever applicable, as per as applicable for this particular submission, and as well as the fees, and the fees are in all cases very same for this new drug for the purpose of clinical trial. It is always 5,000 per product, and also when you have a rejection for your application and you go for an appeal, there is a fees of 2,000 for per product. The documentation, as I said, these are specified as along with this form CT12 or CT13. The permission is granted under rule 60, and which is where the same after the scrutiny of your information, if it is satisfied, then there can be a query or if there is a, if it is not satisfied, there can be a query issued to the applicant, and in case it is satisfied, then permission is issued. When satisfied, the permission is issued in Form CT 15 for the manufacture of the unapproved API, and in the permission for manufacture of the pharmaceutical formulation is issued in CT 14, and for the development of the pharmaceutical formulation. And there are also, as I said, always the timeline is specified is the 90 working days. And in all cases, when there is a rejection, if the documentation submission are not satisfied and the reviewers and CLA has a reason to believe that these applications requirements are not fulfilled and cannot be fulfilled, then such applications can be also rejected with the reasons to be recorded in writing within a period of 90 working days. And in case there are that the deficiencies can be rectified, then we issue the query is issued to the applicant for submission of the documents as per the deficiencies identified. The applicant is, after rectifying the deficiencies, once they submit back to CLA, the permission is again that is being scrutinized by the Central Licensing Authority, and for the API the permission is granted in CT 15, and for the finished formulation the permission is granted in CT 14 within the specific period of 90 working days. And if it is not, then it is again, it can be rejected also within the same timeline of 90 working days. And these are all counted from the date of where this application has been submitted, the response has been submitted. Also there is an appeal mechanism. If it is rejected, in that case you can come back to CLA within a period of 60 days. And if you are not satisfied with the decision of the Central Licensing Authority, it can be gone to the central government with an appeal within a period of 60 days, which can be again reconsidered. So, this is the process you will see throughout these particular slides. Now, for the rule 61, we come to the rule 61. Validity period of permission is always 3 years, and also where it is not satisfied, where CLA is not satisfied, the permission is granted under rule 60 in form CT 14 or CT 15 and shall remain valid always for 3 years, and in exceptional circumstances the permission can be extended up to 1 year when there is a particular reasons, like it is always, as I said, that there was a problem. So, it has to be the applicant who has to justify for asking for an extension, and the same process which is followed for the new drug, it is also for the same for the unapproved API or for the finished formulation, that once the permission is given, if it is not, if it can be suspended or cancelled in case there are reasons to believe, and in case suppose there is an inspection of the facility and there are found it is found that the conditions of the license are not fulfilled, then there can be a suspension or cancellation of the license. Before that, a show cause is given to the applicant to give reply to this, and once the reply is found not satisfactory, then such suspension or cancellation of permission is being done. As said earlier, wherever there is such permission or an such suspension or cancellation is found not acceptable, then they can obviously go to the central government within 45 days to make an appeal and for reconsideration. Conditions of permissions in CT 14 and CT 15 are given under rule 63. As per that, the API should be manufactured or the finished formulation should be manufactured. We say the pharmaceutical formulation should be manufactured under the principles of GMP. It should not be sold anywhere in the market other than the main purpose which is mentioned, that whether it is for clinical trial where you have to maintain a complete record wherever the drug is used, and also in case if it is for the BA/BE study. So, all cases the record has to be complete, and wherever in case the drug is already has expired or it has crossed the shelf life which has mentioned, or it remain unused or there is a leftover, that also it cannot be used anywhere or it cannot be given to any organization or institution. It has to be destroyed and the records to be maintained. Further to this, as we have seen the previously, that once you get a permission from the CLA, as like the CT 11 and CT 12 form applications of CT 11 form applications in CT 10 and getting a permission under CT 11, and similarly applications and permissions you receive under CT 14 and CT 15. After with this permission you have to now apply under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act with the same license, that is which is under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act form 30 to the respective state licensing authority for manufacture of the drugs, and you get a permission in form 29 to manufacture the drug. So, this permission has to be obtained after you get the permission to manufacture the drug from CLA. Once this permission is obtained, then you are permitted to manufacture the drug, and as was also explained earlier, you have the specific rule in 65 for the inspection whenever required by the state or the central licensing authority, or it can be a joint inspection always, and it is always open for inspection, and there can be a notice for such an inspection or there may not be a notice. Also, this coming to the next slides, which is rule 66, which is we feel this the most important, the manner of labeling. It is important to label the drug using the code number or the name. If there is a name for the drug, you may have a code number for an investigational new drug. Wherever applicable, you have to put the batch number or the lot number, date of manufacture, use before date, storage conditions, name of the institution or organization where you are going to conduct the study, and also you have to mention that the purpose for the drug. So, it is very important. What we call this in a clinical trial, definitely we say that it is for the purpose of clinical trial, or it is a new drug for the purpose of BA/BE study. It is a new drug for the purpose of test or analysis. Wherever you give, and we mention also, we can use the word as an IP, I mean the investigational product. Okay. So, this is what we have learnt in these slides from rule 53 to rule 66 for manufacture of the new drug for the purpose of clinical trial. Even in case of this labeling where it is someone else is manufacturing, so it has to be clearly mentioned where it is, when you are going to whom you are going to supply. So, if the manufacturer is different and the recipient who is going to conduct a clinical trial is different, it should be clearly mentioned in the label. And this is very important, no person or manufacturer should ever be able, it is not permitted to alter or obliterate or deface any inscription or mark made on the container, label or wrapper of a new drug manufactured once. So, you have to submit your label to the CLA before you start manufacturing the drug and putting a label. So, it cannot be done, anything which you have mentioned in your application, you are going to mention on your label, that cannot be changed without the permission of the central licensing authority. So, it is said that labeling is very important because label shows that what is the drug, anything, and it is most important to have a proper label on any new drug or investigational new drug. So, we finished the first part of this chapter 12A, and then we have the next part of the chapter 12A, which is chapter 9, and it deals with the import of the new drugs and the investigational new drug for clinical trial, or as I said, it can be BA/BE study or for the examination, test and analysis. So, one was the first part was the manufacture, and the second was that if the applicant proposed to import the drug for the purpose of conduct of clinical trial. As per these clinical trial rules, as per the chapter 9, there is starts with the rule 67 and goes up to rule 73, up to the manner of labeling as well. So, it starts how do you apply. So, the application form in this case is the form CT 16, and as was the conditions in the manufacturing case, also in the conditions of import, you cannot import any new drug or any substance for conducting clinical trial unless you have obtained permission from the CLA. So, you make the application in 2016 for such import of drug with the same fees which is proposed, which is given in the 6th schedule, 5,000 per product, and also with the documents which is mentioned in the 4th schedule. So, you get the permission is received in CT 17 and the timeline is said about 90 working days. So, either your applications after scrutinization will be accepted and a permission will be issued, or otherwise the applications may be rejected, and in case there are deficiencies and it is understood by or it is felt by the CLA that the deficiencies can be rectified, or deficiencies will be issued to the applicant within a specific timeline to comply with. Once the compliance is made by the applicant, then again within the timeline, then the permission can be issued. So, that is the process which goes on for a manufacture or for an import. In all case, the timeline of 90 days to be observed, and deficiencies once rectified is submitted to CLA, then the permission can be further issued. As same as in case of the manufacture is also in the same case of import. If the applicant is not contented, or if the applicant is not is aggrieved with the decision of the central licensing authority, they can appeal to the central government within 60 days, and within the 60 working days the central government will be disposing of. So, as the new drugs and the clinical trial rules has specifically mentioned all timelines, all mechanism, all process for an application and how the applicant has to go stepwise. Regarding the documentation also, as it was told, it is just another recapitulation which is being made for you, that the documentation requirements for any new drug for the purpose of the clinical trial, you have to always refer to the 4th schedule, and when you see the 4th schedule, you will see the 2nd schedule, and the 2nd schedule mentions the detailed documentation requirements and one by one for the different type of drugs, and for the drugs and how the documentation, what are the requirements. So, basically whatever information you have about your drug which you are under development, you have to furnish. The forms are very simple, and it can be the minimum information in which you have to start, but it is very important that you mention clearly about your organization, about your constitution, about the manufacturer, about the manufacturing site address, the drug, the composition, the therapeutic category, all such informations, and there are annexures with each form which is to be fulfilled. So, coming to the validity, it is the same, the 3 years, and it can be also extended where in the exceptional circumstances when you say that there is a reasons and you can satisfy, then in the request of the applicant such license granted can be extended further to 1 year. The conditions of the license is also the same under the rule 70, that it should be that the drug which is being manufactured, it should be manufactured in accordance with the principles of GMP. In all cases, it cannot be given to any person, to anybody in the market, or supplied to any other person or agency other than the one which is specified in the permission. The quantity will be specified in the permission, how much you are permitted to import. The records of all such imported drugs shall be maintained by the applicant, and it has to be how you are disposing of, everything has to be completely maintained, and when there is a damage or unused drug, this also, if you destroy the drugs, the records to be maintained. Also, in case of such imported drug, wherever it is stored, in that case, and you know the imported drug, for storing such imported drug, normally a premise has to be licensed for storing such imported drug, even for the purpose of clinical trial, and such storage also will be mentioned in the permission. And under the rule 71, the inspection is to be allowed, and the same way without prior notice, with or without prior notice, it has to be, it can be verified by the licensing authority. It can be CLA or it can be SLA. Also there is the scope of suspension or cancellation under Rule 72. In case there is a cancellation or suspension and it is aggrieved by the order of CLA, the person, it can go to the central government within 45 days for reconsideration, and also their appeal will be considered within 60 working days. The manner of labeling, as was already told under the previous slides, the same, you have to indicate the name of the drug or the code number, batch or lot number, date of manufacture, use before date, storage conditions, which is most important, because if you do not store the drug in a proper conditions, you have not conducted a stability study for the drug which has been manufactured and which has been proved to be stable in a particular storage conditions, then such drug when given to the patient or in a clinical trial becomes of no use. So, because of the improper storage, and if there is a degradation of the drug due to improper storage, the purpose is not fulfilled. So, your purpose of conducting the clinical trial to test the efficacy of the drug, the safety and the efficacy of the drug will fail. So, it is very important that the storage conditions to be maintained, and in all cases again and again for all the slides, in all the cases you have seen, it is always mentioned that it has to be manufactured observing the good manufacturing practices principles. So that when further this drug is taken up in the further stage, if it has proved to be safe and efficacious for the clinical trial for a particular disease conditions, in that case the manufacturing can be, there can be easily technology, the same technology, the same manner can be used for manufacturing the drug. So, it is very important how you develop your drug, what is your manufacturing process, how you stabilize your drug, and then finally you put it into the storage conditions and you test the drug and you are going to use it into the patient. So, the label is important, the storage is important, organization and institution where the study is proposed is important, and you also say the purpose of the drug. And if it is imported by another person on behalf of another, so everything should be very clearly mentioned in the label, and nobody can alter or change the label, which is a offence under the New Drug and the Clinical Trial Rule. So, in this lecture 12A, what we learnt? We learnt about the New Drug Clinical Trial Rules 2019, where it is mentioned the chapter 8 and chapter 9 talking about the manufacture of the new drug or investigational new drug for clinical trial, and which is same also for conducting a bioavailability or bioequivalence study or for doing examination, test and analysis, because you first of all need to know that the drug is of good quality. So, you need the examination, test and analysis. So, and also the various requirements and conditions, and where conditions are, if conditions are not fulfilled. So, that is the in case of the import of the new drug for the purpose of clinical trial, new drug and investigational new drug for clinical trial. So, in this chapter 12A, we briefly learnt about the new drug clinical trial rules for manufacture of new drug or investigational new drug for clinical trial or a BA/BE study or for examination, test and analysis, and also the rules for import of the new drug and investigational new drug for clinical trial or BA/BE study or for the purpose of examination, test and analysis. So, let us recapitulate, let us have some question answers. Are you ready? It is very easy, is not it? The chapter is very easy, it is so same. For all the regulations you have learned the same thing, but you need to know where it is written, how you have to interpret and how you are going to act on that. So, what is there? As per the new drug clinical trial rules, which chapter contains the rules and regulation for manufacture of new drug, investigational new drug for clinical trials for BA/BE study? Can you please give me the answer? Do you have the answer with you? We have just learnt. It is very easy, chapter 8, rules, and the rules are also, you always have to refer to the rules 52 and 53. We go to next question. As per new drug clinical trial rules, which chapter contains the rules and regulation for manufacture of unapproved API and formulation of new drug for clinical trial? Already written the answer, isn't it? Very easy. Shall I say the answer? Let us see. Chapter 8, same chapter, we have only gone through one of the chapter 8, but the rules are different. Rule 59, 60 and 61, and it is very important to understand the rules, because as I said again and again, you should always refer back to the rules and read the content to understand what is the conditions you should comply with. Question number 3. As per new drug clinical trial rules, which chapter contains the rules and regulation for import of new drug, for investigational new drug for clinical trial or BA/BE study, or for the purpose of test and analysis? Are you correct? Have you written the answer clear? I hope you have not repeated the same answer. Let us see what is the answer. Chapter 9, but you have to mention the rules 67, 68, 69 and 70. Let us do a small fill in the blanks. Validity period of license for import of new drugs for clinical trial BA/BE study is of dash years from the date of its issue unless suspended or cancelled by the central licensing authority. By the time I read, you have written the answer, isn't it? So, let us see the answer. I know everybody has written it correctly. That is 3 years always, in all cases, whether it is manufacture or whether it is import of drugs. So, we have completed the lecture. I hope you have all enjoyed this lecture. If you have any comments, feedback and suggestions, we will be happy to address them, and please write to us for your comments, feedback, suggestions. Thank you very much and all best wishes to you.